Certainly. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me on. So my name's Greg, and I have been involved in Idaho politics probably since late 2017, early 2018. I'd started a website called Idaho Conservatives. I myself am a lifelong Republican. I'm a conservative, and I thought it would be great to have a blog about talking about conservative issues and candidates. And it was in 2018 I was invited. I'd met Doug Ricks, who's now Senator Doug Ricks, early 2018. And he asked me, because he knew my background and that I had a lot of experience in digital marketing and reputation management, things like that, to help him with his campaign. And he was running at the time against, in 2018, against against Ron Nate, who was the incumbent. And Doug's a nice guy. I really like Doug, and we got to know each other. We're good friends. And I really liked what he wanted to accomplish and what he wanted to do. He had a great legacy. His father was the former lieutenant governor, and I think the Ricks name goes all the way back. It used to be Ricks College in Rexburg, et cetera. So they had a legacy working in that area. So now I was looking at Ron Nate. I didn't know this guy. I didn't know anything about what we'd now call the far right and these affiliated groups, the Freedom Foundation. I had no clue 2018 going into this. I was just, like most Republicans, like, oh, okay, well, you've got an R by your name. You must be good. You're a Republican. You talk about these conservative values. Awesome. And it wasn't until I started helping him and that it was discovered that I personally was helping now Senator Ricks with his campaign, that a wave of like personal attacks came towards me. I was doxxed. My employment was doxxed. They went after my job. I think it was then the representative contacted my employer directly. It was like, how do we shut him down? Right? Because apparently what I was doing for Ricks, helping him build websites, helping him be more engaging on social media, turned out to be somewhat effective. And he was, in internal polling, he was down 20 points. Like, he didn't have a chance of winning that race. And in the end, we won by just over 100 votes. And it was a huge upset. I had started a website called Idaho Conservatives. I didn't put my name on it because I wanted to keep myself somewhat anonymous. I wasn't trying to get myself out there. I'm not interested in really being out there. I was kind of forced out there. I liked being behind the scenes. I didn't want to be, I have no intention of, running for office or anything like that. I just wanted to help a good guy win a good, Republican seat. And as a result, one of the Freedom Foundation board members sued me, filed a lawsuit. Well, let me be clear. Filed a lawsuit against my website claiming he didn't know who ran it, even though he did, because we sat down and met for 3 hours. Okay. Not exactly honest. Refused to name me as a defendant because it was a big fishing expedition. $10,000 later out of my own pocket, I killed it or, beat that lawsuit because it was a joke. It was frivolous in my opinion. And that led me to understand what was going on, that there was a group of people, a very small group of people who had money, who wanted to dictate how they believe Republican politics should be. And at that point, I'm like, this is not okay. This is 2018. I spent that entire year of 2018 understanding and learning what was going on, who these individuals were, because they came after me personally. They came after my family. They doxed me. They came after my job. And it cost me a lot of money. Okay. And I learned a lot of valuable lessons. And I learned who was who and, what links they were willing to go to protect their little kingdom. Okay. They'd taken over the local central committee in Bonneville County. And then I learned it wasn't just Bonneville County. It was Kootenai County. It was parts of Ada County. It was a lot of other places around the state. So, right, I live in Idaho Falls. Okay. And that's when, so my organization grew. In January of 2019, I formed a LLC with a number of other good people. So some of the names you'll know went on to help run Take Back Idaho, like Jennifer Ellis, et cetera. And Idaho Conservatives became a real organization. We'd hired someone to simply report, just like other organizations do, just report the news of what's happening at the Capitol. Okay. The second the news came out that Idaho Conservatives was expanding, we had hired someone. We, all the money. I mean, there was all these rumors. Oh, you guys are funded by whatever. I think I was accused of being funded by George Soros or something like that, which is ridiculous, or some other billionaires, whatever. Guess what? I didn't get a penny from anyone, right? This was literally me and 4 other people, local farmers and ranchers who put our own money in to hire someone to do this. Okay. And what happened? Oh boy, all hell broke loose. They came after my job hard. Multiple people contacted my employer directly. Okay. They doxed me. They doxed the person who we had brought on. They did everything they could to destroy, because it wasn't just like, hey, we can work together. We can have a civil conversation. No, we have to destroy you because you're a threat. And what did we do? Well, there was a few articles talking about, oh, so-and-so voted for this bill. Tammy Nichols switched her vote. Literally, that was an article. She switched her vote. That was literally what happened. And suddenly, people like the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance President Greg Pruitt is just going on a rant about how dare you attack a good conservative like Representative Nichols at the time. She's now a senator, et cetera. I mean, it just got vicious. And at that point, I was shut down. Like literally, I was put on lockdown. I couldn't even post on social media. I was asked to be very careful about it because my career was at risk. So individuals in my organizations carried it forward at great personal risk to themselves, and they continued on. And that point, then it was, okay, you know what? We have hit on something really important. What is really happening here? And it was, I think, the first article called exposing what was a term. I don't know if you're familiar with the term called astroturfing. Do you know this one? So astroturfing is where you have a small group of people. So let's say there's like 10 people, okay, or 12 people. Each of them has 3 or 4 different websites, multiple social media profiles, different organizations, and they're coordinating together. Okay. So it's, the term force multiplier, right? That's what it is, right? It's a force multiplier. One person, multiple organizations. Like, for instance, take Dave Riley, the Christian white nationalist from North Idaho, who is linked to Action Idaho, Idaho Tribune. He won't put his name on these sites, right? There's like fake names on them. They're not putting their name on websites, and yet they would attack me for not putting my name on Idaho Conservatives originally, which is really hypocritical, but okay. So it's this idea. And then you have other websites, right? Gem State Patriot, Readout News, True Idaho News, Idaho Dispatch, right? So you'd have this entire network of sites all parroting the same message, and then multiple people within those all sharing almost the identical information, right? So in 2019, we discovered there was a bill. I think it got shelved by a committee member in health and welfare, Senator, who was it at the time? Sorry, I can't remember offhand. But there were 7 individuals on that committee that were targeted, okay, because there was dealing with vaccination. This is pre-COVID. So this wasn't even about COVID. This was about other vaccinations. And Health Freedom Idaho led the charge. You had an article written by former Representative Ron Ney, working with the Freedom Foundation. He was then put over an organization called Madison Liberty in East Idaho, which was indoctrinating BYU Idaho students into their organization. And so he's writing an article. They use the same stock photography. They use the same cartoon they had one artist draw. And you had this group. It was like, okay, so you had Eric Parker from the 3 Percenters. You had Representative Christensen. You had Representative Nichols. It was like the usual suspects. They're all sharing the same content. Representative Scott, Heather Scott, Carrie Hanks, all of them, right? It was like, and it happened like that. It was like the switch got turned on. This campaign got created, multiple websites, all sharing the same message. And then emails are going out. And it was all about, oh, these guys are so bad. These are the dirty 7 because they didn't do what we wanted. And the legislators at the time had never seen anything like this. And, some people contacted friends in my organization. They're like, what is going on? What is this? And so they investigated, looked into it, and then they were able to expose, and they took little screen grabs and shared the actual post and says, here's how this astroturfing campaign worked. This person shared this is where it started. Then this person shared this article. And they're like, well, that's just how social media works. Really? No. No, the whole point was to make it look like you had a force multiplier. You had multiple people, different websites, all these organizations. You were literally inventing a narrative and made it look like it was bigger than it really was. At the end of the day, it was maybe 10 people. No one cared. Exactly. Right. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This was 2019. This was spring. This was the session in 2019. Okay, so this is what, like January. No, I want to say, okay, this would have been March or April of 2019. Then by April, because of that one article, once again, what do they do? Instead of saying, oh, well, our bad, maybe we shouldn't have done that, right? That would have been the civil way to handle it. Instead, these guys came after me. All right. They came after me and they posted pictures of my kids on their on a paramilitary militia group, the Three Percenters Facebook page. They doxed me again. They posted videos about me that were saying things that were absolutely not true. They twist things. They say things that like a thread, and they twist it and and do it. And they once again went after my job. Right? They made my life miserable. And at the time, I couldn't do anything about it. Like I couldn't respond because I was vulnerable. Because they could leverage my employment and say, oh, well, it's his employer that's pulling the strings here, which it wasn't. That was 100% false. That was a lie that was stated, and I saw it posted all over the place. Oh, this guy who he works for is the guy that who's is doing it. That is 100% not true. There was no coordination. There was no communication. Nothing. This is all something I had created in the past on my own, and I'm being attacked for it. They couldn't go after Jennifer Ellis. She's a successful rancher, her and her husband. What are they going to do to her? She owns her own business. You can't fire her from her own company, but you could get me fired, or at least try to. And that wasn't the first time that happened. That's we'll learn later. I don't want to get into all that, but there's, multiple lawsuits. It's cost me a small fortune, fighting this, personally. And it's caused my family a lot of financial harm and damage. And it sucks. Right. But that's what they do. That's how they operate. Anyway, so going back to the story. So Idaho conservatives continued on, for a while. There were multiple articles that came out, and I think the most effective one was an article called "The Foundation of Fear," and this came out in 2020. So during right before the 2020 primary election, some research had been done into how the Freedom Foundation scores their bills. You're familiar with the Freedom Score? Okay. So let me give you a couple of examples. And I know I'm kind of getting into pushing this a little further, but I want to make this point clear. So this article showed there was an example. There was a bill where I think it was Gerald Raymond at the time. He was a sitting legislator. He ended up losing that election, but he had been targeted to have, I think it was Kerry Hanks to run against him. This was planned ahead of time. So during that session before the election, everything had to be done to counter anything Raymond might do. So he's pushing a bill where high school students who got learned another language or something like that, in school and had success, right? Checked off, this accomplishment, will get a gold star on their diploma. Okay. Seems like a pretty minor thing. That seems like a nice thing. Why wouldn't, who cares? That's a great thing. If I'm a high school student, I learn another language in this immersion program. Why wouldn't I get a gold star on my diploma? What's wrong with that? Well, it had been scored, I think, a -1 because it was expansion of government, right? Or some other bogus thing that they put up because they could not allow Raymond to have a win. Well, the problem then was, so in the way this works, as many people know, that representatives and senators who are aligned with the Freedom Foundation, all you have to do is look at the score. If you've got an 85% or higher, you're in bed with them. Just let's not even pretend that's not what it is. They are 100% loyal to this organization that helped them get elected. Okay, they're loyal to their donors. And so when they go vote on a bill, they don't do their own research. They just look at the website. What's it scored? Okay, that's how I'm going to vote. And so people had already put in the votes. Okay, I'm going to vote no because it's -1. But then one of the representatives calls us, hey, this isn't good for me in my district. I actually like this gold star thing. I don't know why you scored it -1. Could you guys fix that? So they went back and changed the score. They literally like, okay, fine, we'll change it. They changed it on the website. But a bunch of them had already voted or didn't go back and check the site. So they voted no. And then they got caught red-handed, right? It was all a scheme. The whole freedom score is a joke. It's all designed to influence policy on behalf of an organization that does not represent Idahoans. It represents others. I don't know that there is a brain, but there's people. So it's right now they brought on Representative Nate, former Representative Nate. He lost, won, and then lost again. He's their golden boy, so he's doing it now. The other guy is this guy named Parrish Miller. I'm not sure if he's still doing it, but he had for many years. Parrish Miller is a very interesting character who, and I want to get this right, had posted content on a personal blog stating that it's not the government's place. And I'm just trying to remember this right. In my opinion, I think he said this. It's not the government's place to protect kids' lives. Like it's okay for parents to kill their kids or something like that. And I'm please don't quote me on the exact, I'd have to pull up the exact article, but it was something really disturbing. And it was disturbing like that. And it was actually Melissa Davlin had wrote an article about it on her blog from Idaho Public Television about it. It was a pretty disturbing thing. This is also the same guy who, after, as you saw, Labrador, right? Attorney General Labrador just stopped prosecution or ended the prosecution of a trespassing ticket. I think it was like $150 fine for Sarah Walton Brady, who staged that protest and then asked to be arrested, right? Like his first action was that. So as a result of that Sarah Walton Brady arrest at the park, the mom who got arrested, right? Whatever, that she totally staged. There was the spokesperson for this Freedom Foundation docs, and this was well documented, right? He had put out information about the local police officer who had arrested her, and Ammon Bundy, Diego Rodriguez, two characters we are well known now. Pam Hemphill, who was arrested and served time for January 6th. Others were outside that officer's home. Okay. And sorry. So at the time, so then Parrish, while all this is going on, is posting, it's okay if you're being kidnapped to shoot your attacker, your kidnapper, or something like that. Well, he's talking about a police officer arresting someone. And the Post Register and others wrote a story about this. Like, wait a second. The guy who writes the Freedom Score, it looks like he's suggesting it's okay to kill cops. And this is the group that flies, the back of the blue flag, right? The blue line flag. When it fits them, right? They also fly a Gadsden flag. There's some, they fly a lot of flags, and there's messagings that are conflicting. The mental gymnastics of how these guys justify their messaging is just beyond me. But that right there is, you have a guy who allegedly is saying it's okay to kill cops. writing the freedom score. And that should send chills behind any legislator looking at this and saying, well, why am I following this group? Why am I looking at this freedom score? Because it 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 is irrelevant. Mhm. No, you're right. Well, let me explain how this works. I know we're uh, this isn't sorry. Okay, let me explain. So it starts with following the money. Okay, why? Well, an organization, a libertarian organization like the Freedom Foundation, gets money from donors. They won't disclose who they are because they want to create privacy around them. They want to protect the privacy of their donors, even though they will not protect the privacy of anyone else. I mean, I remember when they dropped the entire list of voters, including protected names of people who are off the list, judges and people who were abused domestically, etc. They don't care about your privacy, but they care about the privacy of their donors. Why? Because that's where they get their money. That's who pays their salaries. That's who fuels the campaigns so they can get more money to do what they want, to collect power, to gain influence. Okay. That's the game. So, in order to continue to deliver for their donors, they have to have an enforcement tool. There's a few ways you do this. One, there's good cop, bad cop. Oh, we put out a good message. Hey, this is a very conservative bill. There's gaslighting involved. There's misinformation. Well, hey, you know what? We need to. There's porn literacy in our schools being directed by the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, et cetera. Something we know is 100% not true. Okay, but they'll put these messaging out and say, well, we want to protect kids, right? Like these are good messages. We're this. We believe in these things. These are conservative values. But then they twist and distort the truth to get what they want. And so there's the good cop, bad cop messaging. Like, hey, these are the good things. Oh, but if you don't go along with it, you're not a good conservative. You're not a Republican. You're a rhino. And that's where it gets into what's called confrontation politics. They need to be confrontational on purpose to get someone to either fall in line or to disengage. Okay. So the freedom score is an enforcement arm to, they'll say, well, we're just holding people accountable. We have these 12 points that show that this is why we're conservatives. But then when you go in and dig into what those 12 points are and how they apply them, it's absolute BS. And I can name so many bills where they've done that, where, oh, this is against the freedom of speech. We're going to score this Patient Act bill a -9. But really, it's because their board member owns a medical billing company and he's donating $1,000 to Tammy Nichols right before a hearing. So maybe she'll vote the way they want, which she did, right? To try to stop that bill, which their efforts failed, but it proved exactly who was loyal, who are the people they fund, who are the people, and they'll say, well, the Freedom Foundation doesn't fund candidates. Okay, right, right. There's literally like a piece of paper separating the Freedom Foundation from the Freedom PAC, from the Freedom IFF, Idaho Freedom Action, right? They're run by the same people out of the same office. And they're gaslighting us and telling us, oh, well, you're stupid because you're telling us something that's not true. Freedom Foundation doesn't do this, but Freedom Action does. Freedom PAC does, by the same people. So let's just put that aside and end that BS. We know that that's gaslighting. Stop. Mhm. Mhm. I would hope they would be, right? Yeah, that's Mhm. Right. Mhm. Mhm. There's their first mistake right there. You never Yeah. Mhm. Well, Scott, would you ever negotiate with Matt Gaetz? Right, right, right. I believe that. But Mhm. Right. Okay, so, there's a concept I call you've probably heard this called feeding the alligator, right? You feed the alligator in hopes it doesn't bite you, or if it does, you're the last one to get bit. Okay. Time and time again, organizations like this, you're seeing what's happening in Congress right now. Okay. The ultra mega far right, and I think they call themselves ultra mega, um, are out there saying absolutely no. Okay. McCarthy has given these guys, I mean, there's evidence that he funneled money through organization, whatever, donors to them to help them get reelected. He gave them so many things over the years. And now they're coming around like, no, screw you. We're going to do whatever we want, right? There's no loyalty whatsoever. Okay. Same with the IFF and groups like this. And it's not, and I'm saying the IFF as a placeholder for a network of organizations here. They're all interconnected. They're all intermingled. There's financial ties if you dig back through campaign finance reports. It's all connected. Okay, they all have the same agenda. They use the same narratives. They're all working together. Okay, yeah, I'm not in law enforcement. I can't speak to that, but yeah. So that would be, it'd be really interesting to see if that ever got applied. I don't know. I don't know if anyone is going to do that. I can't speak to that. Um, and the thing is, it's political, right? It's not who are there financial crimes being committed? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, who's getting, no one's getting physically hurt. They're not stealing money from anyone specifically or anything like that. So those are actual crimes we know of. I don't know anything like that. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. There's a double standard here, right? And then we'll talk about the left here in a minute. So I know we're getting off track. Was talking about my story, Idaho conservatives and background, but then it gets into the weeds of what we know, what we've seen, because at the end of the day, over the last 4 years, I've seen it. I've seen behind the curtain. I've seen what they'll do to individuals, and not just me. I've seen it happen to other people. I've had people reach out to me and show me, hey, here's what we're seeing online. What is this? Even today, people are calling me and asking me, hey, there's the things going on at the winter meeting and the GOP meeting. What's going on with these rules? Explain this to me. What should I expect? I'm like, well, expect a hostile environment. Okay. Expect this. So that's just kind of the background. But going back to this last bit this is all about, a multi-pronged step to get influence through good cop, bad cop. When that doesn't work, enforcement. When that doesn't work, straight up intimidation. Okay. Perfect example. There was a state executive committee for the GOP holding a meeting, or a procedural meeting, right, for just the executive committees. And I may not be saying this right because I'm not part of the party organization. I'm not an elected official. I'm not elected in any party position. So I'm just talking as an outside observer here. But there was a meeting held to talk about whether or not the party chair, Dorothy Moon, I believe, could push forth a resolution or something to ask for a challenge to vacate a seat from a national committee. Now that sounds highly complicated, right? And it's very inside baseball party politics. But an email went out from the chairwoman saying they're going to try to take me out. They're going to try to take me out of being my position, which is 100% not true. That's not what this meeting was about. So the Idaho Liberty Dogs show up at a procedural meeting of the state GOP committee. I think it was a judicial committee or whatever committee it was, chaired by the vice chair of the GOP. A very boring parliamentary procedure, following Robert's rules meeting. And they get, I don't know, 100 plus people to show up armed, have no clue what's actually going on other than that email saying they're here to take out our favorite person. I was told allegedly one of the leaders of that group spat on the National Committee, which, doesn't sound very nice. Others were there recording when the rules stated you couldn't do that. Those recordings got leaked by individuals who were recording, who may not have been authorized to leak them. There was a coordinated effort by people who were associated with Janice McGeehan's office in these videos explaining this thing, but in a way that was the narrative to explain it to their people, right? To this base, this mob that was there. Because I would consider what I saw there was a mob of angry people armed. And that's fine, right? I have plenty of guns. I believe the Second Amendment is there to keep the government honest and to keep it from becoming tyrannical. Okay, that's the point. It's not to take arms so you can then go, kill or shoot or hurt officers of the government who are there, as agents of law enforcement, army, whatever, right? It's not there to create a revolution against the government. It's there to prevent the government from becoming tyrannical. So there's this authoritarian mindset of, okay, so why would you open carry other than, I open carry when I'm, out camping, hiking, whatever, that's fine. But why do you need to open carry in public inside a city, inside a public library? What's the point? Well, the point there is to intimidate and to send a message. I mean, your background, I think you and I both agree that tactically concealed carry is the smarter way to go. You're not a target. Right. When out in the woods. Yeah. Sure. Sure. It's your right. Yeah. Right. So when they show up to a GOP executive committee, okay, it's not like there's leftists there. They're like, what are you worried about? Antifa showing up? It's a GOP executive meeting. Who is the threat? Right, exactly. And they didn't, by the way. There was no one who showed up except for them. This Idaho Liberty Dog, we call them the Paw Patrol, whatever they are, right? These guys showed up, and the entire intent, in my opinion, was to intimidate. And there were people on that executive committee who had never seen that before. And, I had a friend tell me, he was there. He's like, this was insane. Like, this guy's looking at me. He's eyeballing me. This old guy. He kept opening his jacket and flashing me his gun like he was going to shoot me. Like, what is that? Who does that? Right? Because, yeah. Mhm. Sure. Yeah. It is. It's funny. We laugh because it's funny to think about. But at the end, but when you don't know, when you're someone who's never engaged with this, you're just. I mean, there are so many people who are lay people who are, they have a day job, they have a business, they're a farmer, they're a grower, they're a rancher, whatever. They're in their 60s. They've never encountered this before. They're like, hey, I'm a conservative. I've been one my whole life. My grandfather was conservative. They've been in the state for, and you're like, what is this? Why? Who is the threat? Well, to them, the threat is other Republicans. And that's a really strange, odd thing to say and do. Anyway, we're getting off track here, but so the point is, this is just the example. So I want to say that was how it operates. Right? You asked before, how does this work? Why do they do it? Right? Well, it's one, they have to deliver for their donors a result. Otherwise, just like any business, any operation that requires money, if you're given money, there's an expectation to perform, whether it's for work, whether it's delivering for a client, whether you're selling a product. Okay. In this case, the duty to perform is to pass legislation that's going to help these donors make money off whatever that legislation is. Private school organizations, whatever it is. Okay. So they've got to deliver. And if they can't deliver, if they can't get enough people elected, well, then crap, what are you going to do? We don't have enough votes to pass these bills. Well, then we're just going to push and we're going to be more, what was the word I saw someone say? We're going to be more nasty. We're going to be more vicious. We're going to go after people even harder, and they can just cry harder about it. Right. And we're just going to be awful people on purpose, because that's how confrontational politics work. You are confrontational on purpose to get someone to back down, because most Republicans, most people who consider themselves Christian, are taught to seek harmony, to seek like, yeah, I don't want conflict. I'm not here to fight. I just want everything to be okay, right? I want to live a happy life. I want to seek happiness and have a great family and live my values, right? That's what most people want. They don't want someone yelling in their face and flashing a gun at them. So they do that on purpose. And what do people do? Most normal people are like, I'm not getting paid to do this. I'm out. I'm not going to serve on the central committee if they're going to talk crap about me behind my back, if they're going to post memes about me online, if they're going to talk about my kids, they're going to call my school, my kid's school and check up on my kids. If they're going to do, I mean, by the way, this happened, right, to someone. Hire private investigators, follow them, all to get you to leave. Okay. This happens, and that's not okay. And so going back to why I do this, why I started, I saw these things happening. And who are we if we're in a position to do something, or we feel compelled to do something, or this happens to you? If you don't stand up and do something about it, it's just going to continue. And I stood up. I did what I could to do to call this out. And I'm still standing. And I'm not going to stop standing for what's right. So, that's a really long introduction, but I hope it helps. I know, right? They say that I'm obsessed with them, but then you're just like literally thousands of posts with my name on. I think I own the high rise in a few people's heads. Like the amount of real estate is insane. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Oh, jeez. Yes. Right. I mean, it's easy to just unsubscribe, right? They spent a lot of time doing something that was easy to fix. And I'm fortunate they haven't done those things to me. I think they're a little scared because they've accused me of having a basement full of servers. They think that I have hundreds of accounts online, right? That I have all these Facebook accounts and Twitter accounts, and I'm following them everywhere. That I'm the digital boogeyman in Idaho. I've heard this. I've heard legislators say this. I've heard their wives say this. Right, right. And here's the thing, Scott. None of that is true. None of it is true. I don't have all these fake accounts. I have my political potatoes account. I have my actual account, Twitter account with my name on it, my Facebook account with my name on it. All the organizations that I've been a part of, my name's on them. Okay. I'm not hiding. I don't need to use a fake account to tell the truth about you. And yet, every time someone pops up with a fake account, it looks like we got to boil water in Idaho Falls. Fun. Yeah, there's a water issue here. It's like an Amber Alert or something on my phone. Anyway, so um, they think all these things. It's like, so then anytime there's something that pops up, they just automatically assume it's me. And here's the thing, no, it's not me. And they'll just lie, even when they know when there's evidence proving it. They'll think it's going to trigger me or something like that. Like I'm going to get mad, and they'll throw out a racist comment at me because here's the thing: I'm half Hispanic. My mother was born in Mexico. That's everyone knows this. Who cares, right? So why are you making these like ridiculously racist statements about me? Like I don't care. It's not hurting my feelings. Yeah, it pisses off my family. I mean, it's pretty low to say things like that, but dude, you're not impacting anything except for making you look like a racist when you say It's just so dumb and silly. But anyway, that's addressed. So let's get on to moving forward onto the different organizations. We talked about one in particular. Mhm. I think they're giving them a little credit there. In my opinion, they're a paper tiger. And the thing is, I love the new Twitter thing where it shows you the count, the view count. Go look at the view counts. Go look at the view counts for like my. Check this out. This is actually really interesting. Go, and I'm actually going to do a and check like go through since they started that right and go look at like all the posts. Maybe do a spreadsheet and show side by side how many people actually see their stuff, how many people actually like and comment and share their things. Very, very. Mhm. Are you talking about no compromise? Yep. I guilty. I was behind part of that. Sure. Sure. Right. Mhm. They call it the network. They're a network. It's not just the organization. It's their affiliated groups, their people. Yeah. Right. It's the astroturfing network. Yeah. Mhm. Right. I think they're gonna do that this weekend. I mean, they're trying to push rules that will take the voice away from everyday voters. Let them down. Mhm. Well, that's what happened at the last convention, right? It was baked. I knew what was going to happen. I knew Dorothy Moon was going to be the chair. Luna didn't have a shot. Other people were telling me, "Oh, we got this." Like, no, you don't. You don't have anything. They've got people, allegedly getting, paying for people to show up as delegates, paying their way there, right? It was all coordinated. They had to take it down because they had to block a lawsuit. They had a lot of things objectives they had to hit that were really important. They could not let Luna win, right? So they pulled out all the stops. They showed their hand. It was baked a month or two ahead, or weeks or a month ahead of time. And those who didn't see it were blindsided. Like, what? How did this happen? It happened because you let it happen. You kept feeding this alligator, right? You kept saying, "Oh, it's just going to go away if we leave it alone. If we don't address it, if we don't challenge them, they'll just burn out." No, no, it's their own fault. Then you wanted to call it the establishment or whatever. It's their own fault. This exists. Yeah, it's just like what's happening to McCarthy, right? It's his own fault. He's in this situation because he kept feeding these alligators, and I mean, they are the swamp monsters. I mean, it's a big swamp, but those are their own breed of swamp monsters, and we have our own swamp in Idaho, and it is the far right, and the establishment they have their own swamp, and they're like, well, you anyway. We could go on for this. But yeah, we sure, yeah. Wait, you're not a card carrying socialist? I've been accused of being that. Right? I've been accused. Yeah, exactly right. No, yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. Well, let's address those two groups. Okay, so let's start with the Idaho or let's start with Reclaim Idaho. Luke Mayville runs that. Luke Mayville's smart guy, younger. They kind of grew out of I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson. Okay, let's go back before Reclaim Idaho became big. There was another group called Better Idaho. I don't know if you've ever heard. Okay, so this is going back 2014 to 2016. So there was a candidate running in Pocatello who asked me to look into this group because they had put up a website attacking them. And like, what is this? Who are these guys? What's going on? It had the Better Idaho name on it. And I've heard somewhere that they might be coming back. I don't know. What that was, as I did some research on it, is going back to the Obama administration, post Obama administration. When he left, you had people from his administration see an opportunity in campaigning because this is like the beginning of social media, using the internet, being effective with that. And so these groups, there was a group called Acronym, I think it was, a very savvy lady who started that up, and it was a nonprofit, kind of like the IFF, right? Like a nonprofit group that could influence campaigns and funnel money through other groups. That led to the creation of Act Blue, which enabled a core group, and the Clintons were associated with this and other groups, to funnel all campaign donations through one entity that they could collect a percentage on, right? And have a single donor list. And that's when all these emails would pop up. Like, why am I getting an email from so and so or this person? That's what kind of kicked that off. It's like you had one central database for all donors. So from that, then I want to say it was Obama's team set up a foundation in Chicago where they promoted these fellowships where you could go there, go to Chicago. It was a 3-week course, right? You stay there and they train you and indoctrinate you on how to do these things. And this is where, like, you hear about confrontational politics on the right. You hear about rules for radicals. And the whole point of confrontational politics, the book written by H.L. or Bill Richardson, who was a former California senator back during the Reagan administration, I think it was 80s, 90s, whatever it was. He's like, well, I'm writing this book. I'm doing this because these are the tactics the left use, right? They started this. So, right. They did these things. And you know what? That's not entirely untrue, right? You look at some of the things that happened. Let me give you an example of this. During the presidential primary, Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders, okay? And we talk about how effective Facebook groups are. Bernie Sanders, and I can't remember what state it was, but during the primary, Bernie Sanders had a Facebook page with like 55,000 followers. Huge group. The Clinton campaign was concerned that that group was influencing votes, getting people signed up, registered, and that would hurt their chances and that Bernie could win that state in the primary. So someone on Hillary's team had this idea, well, let's infiltrate the group. And you're going to hear these tactics, right? And tell me if these don't sound familiar, okay? So they got people to go into the group and start saying the most awful, racist, vile things in this group, okay? But they weren't saying they were Hillary people. They were like saying, oh, I'm a Bernie bro, and pretending to be a Bernie bro and saying these horrible things. And then they would have other people in the group report the group to Facebook's administrators, bypassing the page administrators. What happened? Right before, a week or two before the primary, when they needed to organize to get out to vote, that group got shut down by Facebook because the racism, because they intentionally said things that violated the terms and conditions of Facebook by design. It was disruptive. It was confrontational. Okay. So these are some pretty nasty, dirty tricks played by the left, by Democrats. And this is what, 2015 this happened? This goes back a ways. This has been going on a long time, and it just kept evolving. Now, people on the other side are paying attention to this. Right? I saw this happening when it happened. I was watching this. I go, this is really interesting how they're doing this. I haven't deployed those tactics, but in my business where I'm helping companies protect their brand's reputation online, I have to watch for threats and attacks. So understanding these things is part of my career. You probably have similar things you watch for in the work that you do. So it's really important to see this. So the left has all these weird things. So this organization founded by Obama's team, whatever, in Chicago, then branched out to creating a multi-state network. Better Idaho was part of that network. And they did this in other states. So think about like a left version of IFF in multiple states, all funneling the same messages and money through their connected groups and organizations. Okay. I think they thought maybe it was sure, but what's interesting is they all faded away, right? That all dried up. Better Idaho went away after the 2016 election. After Clinton lost, this was really interesting. After Clinton lost, well, there was no reason to keep funding it. And I'm not saying an accusation because I don't know what happened there, but it's sure, once again, there's smoke, right? Huge. Well, but it burst. And I think the problem with the Democratic Party at the time was Clinton, like Trump had. So in this, once again, let's look at the models here. Okay, Act Blue, connected to to all these Democrat organizations, the party machine. All this is a way to funnel money. One central database to collect all the donor emails. Okay. Well, do you know that Jared Kushner was behind WinRed? WinRed, as far as I know, and looking into this, and feel free to research this, is a for-profit entity built by people connected to Trump, including Kushner. The guy who actually built it was hired by the RNC or the GOP nationally, who had built something similar and was promoting it and making money off of it, doing something for the party, which people are like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. Then gets tapped, repurposes and brands it to by Trump's people. Okay. So you want to know why Trump, in my opinion, why Trump has so much power over the party? Because he holds the email list and all the donor lists. He literally, his team gets a fraction of every donation to Republican candidates. That's millions of dollars. I mean, literally, the last number I saw was they had funneled multiple billions of dollars through WinRed. And you see local campaigns use it, right? The state GOP uses it. Local candidates use WinRed. And it's an alternative to something like Anodot or another, platform you use to collect money for donations because they give you the full reporting and everything else. It's a great tool. There's nothing wrong with the tool. I think the software and the tech behind it's great. But when you understand that when you donate to a candidate through WinRed, you're going to start getting emails from Steve Bannon, from the Stop the Steal groups. The Mike Lindell is going to send you emails. Well, I didn't subscribe to an email from Mike Lindell. Why am I getting emails from? Oh, because they sell the list. They make money off of it. Sure. Okay. Mm, right. Oh, I agree with you 100%. So something people don't know about me is I have a very close family member who's a prosecutor in another state who's served on FBI task forces going after um, what do you call it? Special victims and child crimes and stuff like that, and prosecuting these really horrendous people. Like the catch a predator stuff. They're on those task force. Yep. And so I've heard these stories. Like you don't ask a question unless you already know the answer to it, right? That's how you catch them. When that guy, I can't remember his name, the Moscow murders guy, right? He's going across the state. He's getting pulled over by the Indiana state troopers or police. They were directed to do that, right? They needed the footage, and it's so much easier to get the evidence that way than have to try to get it from the perpetrator, right? It's so much easier because you got body cam footage. You don't have to subpoena it. It's like they hand it over willingly, or it's just part of the investigation. So there's so many tools they have at the thing. So they are. Yep. They're very valuable. Yeah. So, and it's old school tech and it works great. And people know that. So going back to the story, Better Idaho, that organization, those people, who are volunteers, they able to gather lists, create things. And I don't know the direct correlation between Better Idaho and Reclaim Idaho, but there was a shift from that kind of going away, and suddenly Reclaim pops up, right? A lot of their donors, I believe, came from the state of Idaho, and I'm sure there's money from outside. And I can't speak to this because I haven't really done a lot of research on their funding. There's a lot of news stories about this. Feel free to read about it. What's interesting, though, is they were a group that was highly effective in doing the door knocking campaigns, right? They proved that knocking doors in Idaho, canvassing, really, really worked. And that's why you see far right groups do this now, and effective on a small scale, like in Canton County, North Idaho, et cetera, right? Pay people, go knock on doors, give them marriage, and then have one group follow the same group to the same people. So you get 3 different door knocks, slightly different version of the same message, attacking the opponent or supporting the guy you want elected, right? All of them spreading misinformation or misinformation. I don't know what Reclaim was saying was true or not. I can't speak to the narratives, but they focused on Medicaid expansion. And the big part of that was the legislature was not doing their job in addressing this issue, good or bad, whatever the solution was. There was no compromise. It was just a constant no, 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 no. We're not going to do this, right? We're not going to fix this problem. And to be fair, there were people in Idaho who needed a solution, whatever that solution was. I'm not going to speak to the policy on that. I'm not a policy guy. That's not my lane. But they were effective in doing a ballot measure. And that terrified Republican groups, right? And then they tried it again. They were effective. So what did they have to do? They did revenge against ballot initiates. Revenge, well, they called it revenge against the voters, right? They wanted to limit ballot initiatives and the ability to do ballot initiatives. So when you don't get your way, what do? You change the rules. We're seeing that right now with the party. Okay. And they did that. They tried to do that, right? They limited you have to have this percent people signing the things from these rural districts, and they made the limit, made it really, really hard. And I can't remember. I think that was killed by the Supreme Court or whatever happened with that. That is what it was. But Reclaim was successful in achieving their goal of pushing a ballot initiative. And then they tried it again. And I remember I was at an event in Idaho Falls a few years back. Rich was there. A lot of legislators were there I met with. And it was Reclaim Idaho was doing a presentation about, a post-ballot initiative, talking about what they'd done and what they're doing as an organization. And I remember talking to Luke Mayville afterwards. And I'm like, well, what's your next thing? What are you going to work on next? And he's like, well, I want to focus on education. I'm like, okay, well, we do, there's issues that need to be addressed. Once again, I can't speak to that. I don't know what you're going to do. And he's talking about well, basically it was this tax the rich thing. And I'm like, I don't agree with that. And Idaho conservatives came out and wrote an article. I think a newly elected representative helped author that article, talking about how this new ballot initiative was not good for Idaho. And it gave the numbers and showed how this was going to be bad for taxpayers and how it was unfair and all. And it was a very problematic, in my opinion, problematic initiative. But I don't know that they ever planned on succeeding, right? That was the point, because at the end of the day, they did succeed in pushing the governor and others to focus on, okay, we do need to spend more money on education. We need to solve some of these problems. We have this we have this revenue windfall, right? Let's use some of that money. And they did. And that's fine, whatever that is. And there was a consensus from Republicans on this. Okay. They were not able to get their ballot initiative thing. This basically killed it, right? So then it didn't need to be on the ballot. And then it was the governor's initiative in getting that agreed upon as was it constitutional amendment? I can't remember how they did that. But anyway, whatever that was on this last ballot. Don't quote me on this. Once again, I'm not a policy guy or an expert on this. I just know some elements of the story. So are Reclaim a bunch of leftists? Are they a horrible group? One, they are Democrats. Two, I don't agree with a lot of their policies and things that they're pushing. Okay, as a conservative, as a Republican, I thought that was a bad initiative. Right, I wasn't going to support it, and I and others publicly stated I'm not a fan. And Luke got all mad at me, like, "Well, we talked about this." I thought you'd be okay with this. I'm like, no, I'm not okay with this. Why would I be okay with this? Right? This is not, this impacts me personally, right? This affects, I vote with my pocketbook, and this one is bad for my family and things like that. So, but should we villainize them? Are they communists? Are they groomers? Are they hurting our kids? Are they villains that need to be, do we need to set up gallows like they did in January 6th for them? No. Right? That's the narrative. Like, if you're a Democrat, you murder and chop up and eat babies. Like, that's what they're literally saying. It's crazy, right? In my opinion, it's just it's way out there. But that's the jump they want you to make, right? I know plenty of people who are Democrats, who are leftists, who are people who align with socialism, whatever. I don't agree with their policies. I think that some of the things they say are kind of out there. I won't agree with those things. But do I not like them as a person? I think some of them are good people. I get along with them great. But I'm not going to, villainize them like that. Okay, so now that leads to the next group, Idaho 97%. Okay, so this group was founded by, so the idea behind the 97% is, we all have heard of the paramilitary group, some call it a militia, the Idaho 3%. Funny story, it's right. As you know, right, the backstory is, 3% of patriots stood up in the Revolutionary War, which turns out to be not true, right? That those numbers are highly, they're not accurate at all. Even they admit that in their story. Like, well, that was kind of a myth, urban legend, whatever, but we stick with the story. Even though it's been fact checked so hard, it's not true. But so they're literally based on a story that's not true. Okay. The 3% was founded by a guy, is it Brandon Curtis? I don't quote me on the name. I'm trying to remember. So this guy showed up with a bunch of trucks at the Malheur standoff in Malheur wildlife thing, the bunny standoff there, where Lavoy Finnegan was shot by law enforcement after he reached in multiple times to where he had a pistol hidden, concealed. Anyways, that was that setup. So he shows up like, hey, we're going to be standing the gap between the FBI, the federal authorities, the agents, and the people of the standoff. Okay. We could talk about that all day. There's some really fascinating stories out there. There's some really interesting videos out there. People saying, well, we just, shoot our way out of this kind of thing. Crazy, very extreme, almost domestic terrorist related stuff going on there. Anyway, and those ties from Malheur tie back to Idaho legislators and other people here. But this Brandon guy was running the 3%ers. Okay. He goes on, I think, so you have Todd Engel, the guy who was arrested, served 14, 15 months in prison, whatever, and then was pardoned or had his sentence commuted or whatever it was. Okay. That's not I don't care about that. Allegedly, the group got mad at him because he may not have been sending money like he was supposed to. So there was some issues, financial issues within the organization. And this guy later on gets, I don't know. I can't speak to their finances. All I know is that the current leader of the group really didn't like the old leader. And there was a split. And the old leader went on to get arrested for pulling a gun on a process server. And then I think he may have been, there were some issues. He was running a property management company, not paying people, or there were some issues with financial improprieties that he eventually got charged for and had to pay restitution. And actually, I think he served some time. And now he does he's out, right? But he never handed the name over. So the actual 3% brand isn't even the real 3% brand. So they had to call themselves the real Idaho 3%ers. That's the story, right? That's why, because the actual 3%ers is this other guy who they don't even like anymore. So, trouble in paradise, I guess, right? You see the infighting now. It's like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz doing this, right? It's hilarious to watch. That's what happens. They always implode. They always turn on each other, and that's what happens. Yep. 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 Exactly. That is great analogy. So the 97% is a take on that. It's the 97 minus 3. 100% is minus 3 is 97. So and their tagline was, So this came about during COVID, right? They were burning masks at the Capitol. They're doing all these protests. You had, the playground lady, Sarah Walton Beatty, who, by the way, is the sister of the founder of the Idaho 97. I don't know if you know that. Yeah, it's interesting the different sides in that dynamic, and I don't care. I think they get along as family members, and that's completely unrelated, right? Not going to address that, but it's just funny how everything is so interconnected in the state. So these groups were just out there doing these things, and people are like, you know what, and it was actually my understanding it was a number of medical professionals, um, who would give small donations to this group. Was this group funded by Soros or anything else like that? No. No, they weren't. It was literally small donations from people. This is what I've heard from people in that group. I think they registered as an LLC. Um, I think. I don't quote me on that. I don't know because I'm not part of that group. I was never a part of the organization. Um, but I had friends who knew people in there, and some people. I had people contact me from all over the state with different groups, because they're like, "Hey, what's going on? What are you doing? How can I help? Whatever." So there's information sharing all over the place. Okay, and so the 97 is like, it's Emily Walton and this guy named Mike Satz, who is a former dean of law at the University of Idaho. He's a Navy veteran. Served. He served on a carrier or on some boats. He was an officer. You had Walton was a former. You could say she's a progressive lobbyist activist who ever worked for some different groups. Okay, that's fine. She's definitely on the left. And a few other people. Okay, they were well-meaning private citizens stepping up and saying, you know what? And their tagline was, "We're tired of all the bullshit." I thought that was pretty funny, right? And it's true. And there were a lot of people who are getting sick of this, and we're seeing that now, right? I mean, you and I'm tired of it. I see it all the time, right? Right? And so that's a fair point to say, I'm tired of all this stuff. Now, did they promote, were they out there saying, "Oh, we're left leaning. We're here to take your guns. We're a gun, right? A gun, what do you call it?" So there's gun rights and there's gun control. Were they a gun control group? No. Was one of the individuals in the group, had she worked for gun control groups or pushing gun restrictions? Yeah, that's true. Do I agree with a lot of their agenda, their policies, or their personal political viewpoints? No, right? As a conservative Republican, I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that the individual's personal politics were. The goal of, hey, let's get pushback on some of this far right extremism and get people to have a voice on that. That's okay. I mean, don't we all have a right to organize? To have a voice? So they did, and they got a lot of small, not even a lot. I don't even know how much money they got, but it wasn't very much. Small dollar donations, and I think a lot of them were from medical professionals or something like that. Doctors are like, "Look, I'm tired of all this COVID misinformation that's coming out there," and I don't care where you land on that subject. There was misinformation on both sides, right? I don't think it was handled well. But there were some people who were pushing just straight up misinformation for profit. Like, look at frontline doctors. That was yeah, 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 yeah. Well, and once again, using astroturfing groups, small groups, force multiplier, multiple pages, multiple things, where one individual runs multiple groups. Right? You see a lot of that. You know, media news organizations, right? Oh, we're unbiased media, just telling you the truth, but don't listen to the actual media, right? Don't listen to the Idaho Statesman or East Idaho News. They're just a bunch of leftists telling and pushing an agenda, right? Okay, so the guy who's reporting on car accidents and the traffic and weather, they're pushing a leftist agenda. Okay, right. Okay. I see where you're going with that. Okay. Anyway, or you're the guys pushing, telling you about local high school sports. They're leftists that are pushing an agenda. Okay. Uh, anyway, so that's all part of that network. So 97% was a pushback to that group. Yes, they're a liberal uh, leaning and run by people who are Democrats. Okay, but they tried to work with Republicans. Were they effective all the time? No. You have well, okay. Okay, well, this goes to another idea. Let's go back to that freedom score. Okay. Dirty little secret about the freedom score. It only works because they have the Democrats in there. They're scoring the Democrats. Okay. Here's the thing. Democrats have to vote on all the bills, right? 90% of all the bills put forth are put forth by a Republican. So they're voting on Republican bills and they're scored 50%. And so you that's the baseline, right? And so you're anyway, it gets a little more complicated, but when you take the Democrats out of the scoring, the whole thing falls apart. It's a joke. It's such a joke. Anyway, so yeah, a lot of people what the far right needed was a bogeyman, right? They needed a villain. And the 97% was a perfect example of like, oh, look at these leftists. Look what they're doing. They're showing up. They're at the Capitol. They're talking to legislators. They're fighting good conservatives. How dare they? Right? Oh, they're going to push these extreme agendas and things like that. Well, then the 97% comes out and does like a voter guide or here's who we recommend in the primary. And they're saying vote for Brad Little. Yeah. Oh, that was the point, right? And they're like, that's the kiss of death. You got endorsed by the 97. Therefore, you're a leftist. No. They're like, we're looking at common sense, conservatism. They're being pragmatic, right? They know a Democrat's never going to win in that race. 100% impossible, not going to happen. So, who is a Republican who's going to be good for Idaho? That's how they were pitching it. Okay. So, like, but a liberal did it. It's like when the Idaho Education Association, right? When they put money in through whatever organization and goes into a PAC and then they send a mailer and it supports a candidate. They're like, this candidate, might actually be good for teachers. Okay. They're not going to be pushing vouchers. Oh, by the way, don't say vouchers, right? That's the dirty word you're not supposed to say, that they all are talking about, but won't actually use that word. And so they'll put money in. But if you get money from that, you get money from the conservation voters or whatever. Oh, those are leftist groups, right? 10 years ago, they donated to someone who backed Hillary. So therefore, they're leftists, right? It's so ridiculous. They attacked Doug Ricks with that. Like, Doug Ricks is as conservative as they get, but they'll use that line. Anything, any narrative, any thread they can pull to say you're evil because of X, right? It's all narrative. And so they gotta have the bogeyman. And that's what that is. So the 97 was a scapegoat bogeyman for the far right. Say, see, here's what they're doing. We're proving we're doing this. And now I think their new bogeyman is drag queens, which I'm just gonna say, I never saw drag queens in my feed or on social media except shared by far right people. Like their feeds are full of it and they see a lot of it. And if they're worried about being groomed or indoctrinated, I'm surprised they haven't all turned out one way because that's their narrative, right? Right. Yeah. I'm my kids are at these shows, right? I don't even know, nor do I care, nor do I want to be a part of it. I look, they're okay. Let me tell you a quick story. That's actually really funny because it goes back to the Idaho Liberty Dogs. Okay, this is a funny story. So they had put out a notice that there's the Idaho Botanical Gardens is going to do a drag show, whatever, for Christmas. I don't know. I don't care. That's not my thing. But they were like, oh, this whole narrative, and you're seeing it nationally. Like, they have to attack this one group because that's the more extreme fringe thing because it does make some people uncomfortable. I get a little squeamish with it. It's a little, I don't know. Well, that's when, right, exactly, right, why? Yeah, yeah. Or like the guy in Boise who shot himself in the foot with the AR at a protest. Yeah. Okay. So, well, here's the funny thing. So they're like planning this protest. They're planning an armed response to that. They were going to show up and intimidate, like they do. That's the whole point of their group. Well, then I put up on Twitter on my account, Political Potatoes. There was something going on one night in San Antonio. Similar event. There was a drag show, whatever, in San Antonio, and so the local patriot group, similar to the Liberty Dogs, they all look alike, right? They're all dressed the same. They're still wearing the same tactical gear. Um, you know, plate carriers made in China, whatever. And the ARs, and they're like, whatever. And the funny thing is, they'll wear masks, right? It's okay for them to wear masks, but they wouldn't mask for COVID. It's just funny. Like they're yeah, right. I mean, exactly right, right. But some were wearing masks, some were not. It doesn't matter. That's a whole mask thing. I don't know. Maybe they're worried about pneumonia or something. Who cares? Whatever. So they show up. There's like maybe 8 to 10 of them. But on the other side of the street, they were literally outgunned by the left because the liberal protesters were just as armed. You had like a grandpa. Yeah, it's Texas, right? Right. So they're carrying too. And guess what? Shocker, there are Democrats who own guns. Imagine that, right? The Second Amendment applies to everyone. And so I put out there this tweet like, well, maybe liberals in Idaho need to rethink their position on firearms ownership, right? Like, because here it is. Here's proof that force on force. You don't want to be intimidated by these guys, then show up armed too. And they did. And the Patriot group, whatever you want to call them, they look like damn fools. I mean, it was embarrassing how bad they were outgunned, and they're just standing there looking like idiots and like, we don't know what to do. Well, as a result of that tweet that went out, suddenly there's a lot of comments from known liberals and people that have been known on the left were commenting like, "Why own guns? You're right. We should bring guns. We're gonna bring guns. We're show up armed. Like we're gonna do this. Like we're not gonna be intimidated anymore." And you know what happened with the Liberty Dogs? Not a one of them showed up. And then there was people screen grab messaging within the group. And then they're like, they got David Riley to help them with Idaho Tribune and like do the message like, oh, well, it was just a joke. Like they fell for it. We weren't ever actually going to show up. And then they did all this stuff, right? No, they were going to show up. They all chickened out. And then in the internal messaging, they're attacking each other, right? Once again, infighting, eating their own. Like, well, why didn't you show up? You were supposed to show up. Why didn't you show up? You chickened out, right? Like they're like pointing fingers and like, no, we did plan on going. Why didn't you go? And at the end of the day, they chickened out because yeah, no. Well, it's like the alpha dog mentality, right? But there's been a lot of study that shows that the alpha dog in a pack only exists because that is a highly dysfunctional group of dogs. They are wounded, broken dogs, and one of them has like been so abusive towards the other ones that they default to follow that one. A healthy group pack does not have an alpha dog like that. They work together in sync. And so these guys brag about being alpha dogs, and I laugh. I'm like, well, that's because you're a highly dysfunctional person. Yeah. They're under attack. Right. Right. Look at Rittenhouse. Yeah. Right. Right. No, you want to avoid violence at all. Like the did you read that article recently? It was written by the Second Amendment and Alliance guy, right? He says like, why, are we prepared to take up arms and fight our own military? Are we prepared to go to war with our own government, right? How we could win a war against the government. And he's like, and comparing, well, I mean, look at the Middle East. Like, look at these insurgencies, how they were able to take on a, $1 trillion army, funded army, with an AK. And what are you looking to accomplish by saying that, right? You're promoting this idea that, okay, so you own a gun so that you can take arms against the government. And who's going to enforce law and order? Local police, local National Guard. What? Right. So you're promoting, right. So you're promoting shooting your local police officers, and yet you're flying a blue line flag. What the hell is wrong with you? No. Yeah. So it's dangerous, irresponsible. So just full disclosure here, disclaimer. I'm in open litigation with Pruitt. I'm filed litigation against him for defamation of me. He attempted to get me fired from my job. He's cost me a lot of money, caused a lot of harm to my family. and I'm seeking damages against him for, to hold him accountable for the lies and vicious things he said about me personally to harm me and my family. So I'm careful about what I say about him. I don't have anything kind to say because of the harm he's caused me personally. But I do seek to hold him accountable for that. And so this is interesting. He was, yes. Well, yes. I This is just pure speculation, right? He's currently being sued. I am 100% confident he's going to lose that lawsuit. Okay. There's a lot of things happening there. I can't really get into because I'm not going to discuss, that. But I believe he's moving assets, right? Like, look at Alex Jones. He's filing for bankruptcy, trying to hide his assets, right? He's getting, he's facing 1.2 billion or something like that in damages that he owes the Sandy Hook victims, right? So these people who just lied without consequence for so many years, and now they're being held accountable. What do you do, right? He owned Idaho Dispatch. He claimed he didn't own Keep Idaho Free, but why is he the only one writing on that site? Who owns that site? There's a lot of things that are question marks that have not questions that have been asked but not answered, that should be answered. And these sites were used to openly defame myself and others. Okay. Um, and that needs to be held to account. But I've noticed a shift, right? Well, is he moving things? Is he shifting assets? Is he hiding things? He How much did he get for Idaho Dispatch when he allegedly sold it to Misty Carlfeld, whatever her name is, and Sarah Clinton, and now it's run by David Pettinger. Oh, well, David Pettinger he's an interesting character. So here's a guy who shows up at the state GOP convention. I think it was like a summer ago. So you remember Aaron Von Eilanger? Okay. So, and once again, deep ties to that group. Idaho Dispatch was, in my opinion, trying to shield and cover for him, along with Readout News and others, spreading information, doxing the victim, et cetera. All were involved. Um, you know, this 19-year-old rape victim's name was being shared publicly on these sites. Some were like, oh, we didn't mean to do that. And some were like, well, so what? This Pettinger guy shows up at the convention dressed in drag. I kid you not. He's dressed in drag. Like, they don't like drag queens, yet he's their media guy. Wearing a sash, like a beauty queen sash, with the name of the rape victim on it. How horrible of a person do you have to be to do that? And this is the guy who's out front on Idaho Dispatch. This is the guy that Greg Pruitt gave the site to, and saying that they're the media's trusted local ally. They're the most unbiased media source. Hmm? Why do we need? Yeah, sure, right, hmm, right. Selling memberships, right? To do what? What value did they actually add? Did they? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. Or what is that? The Idaho Pistol and Rifle Association. I mean, there's other groups that are focused on training. They're focused on other things that, like, hey, we want to help build and establish ranges across the state. We can go shoot in public spaces. That's helpful, right? I would love a good open range out here that we could shoot at. Things like and promoting that sort of thing. That's well, so that Facebook page, the Idaho Second Amendment Laws Facebook page. If you look, if you do go look at the transparency where it shows who the page admins are, the majority of the content is now posted by the new admins or new admins on there. So they're the multiple people, which are the Door Brothers. The American Firearms Alliance, which is the Door Brothers, are actually running that page now. The majority of it, right? He puts up videos, Zidio puts up videos once in a while, but I would say the vast majority of the content all is branded AFA. It's all, let me just bluntly, it's just shit posting, right? It's just weird, untrue, trying to be funny, sarcastic memes, right? That accomplishes nothing. But the whole point of it is, but if you put out this meme, I'm going to get a bunch of likes. And if I get a bunch of likes, then I have engagement. And I can say, look how big we are, right? It's the same people liking it over and over again. And that post is being shared across 20 other Facebook pages around the country run by the same 5 people. Okay. Here's the kicker. One of those people in that group, Patrick Parsons, was Marjorie Taylor Greene's chief of staff. Shocker that they're connected. Right? And you know the backstory, right? With the Door Brothers, how, right, the state senator from Iowa back in 2012 who went to prison for that money exchange, the alleged bribe. How the Door Brothers walked away from that, I don't know if they were informants or what, but that whole thing was shady. I remember reading about that back in 2015. I read that story, and it was in Politico. I think it was Politico that covered that story about this state senator. And I had no idea who the Door Brothers were. I had no idea who the senator was. It was just a really interesting story about this guy who was a influential state senator on the right who went to prison for this scandal where they were paying for this. The one guy was trying to sell the list from Michelle Bachmann. Is that her name? Yeah, we're talking 2012, right? Romney was running, Bachmann, Ron Paul, all that, right? He's trying to sell this list because he was working for the campaign, and that guy was one of the Door Brothers. And they were trying to get this guy to endorse Ron Paul. And so it was Paul's team trying to take the guys, and it was like the homeschoolers list, parents list. And so he was basically trying to sell this or offload it, exchange for this guy's endorsement. The details of all this story are well documented. They're on this podcast. They're on news stories. I don't know that I'm telling correctly. I'm just kind of giving my opinion summary of the whole thing, but it was crazy. These guys were involved with things going back from 2012. They're on that No Compromise podcast. It also ties them to R.J. Rishtuni, who is the Christian Reconstructionist guy, who is a avid Holocaust denier. Right? You go Google this guy, you're like, holy crap, this guy's crazy. He's into dominionism. He's into these really fringe things. You're like, this is some strange theocratical stuff. Why is this guy anywhere near policy? He's the guy who coined the term, have you heard this? Government schools. Right. It comes from Rishtuni. Okay. Here's the kicker. Look up R.J. Rishtuni, then go look at the American Family Policy's latest email. They literally quote Rishtuni. They have a quote and his name on there in their email newsletter. That should scare the crap out of people if they knew who this guy was, who their influencers are. False prophets, people who are way out there. I mean, you connect the dots between this guy and some other groups, the Door Brothers. You connect the dots of what's going on in North Idaho, going back to we could do a whole episode on the history of North Idaho, of the Posse Comitatus or Posse Comitatus group, right? That led to Timothy McVeigh. Those connection points. If you haven't heard the podcast, 2 minutes past 9 by Leah Satelli, I highly recommend it. It talks about Timothy McVeigh. She actually interviews some of his people he served with in the army in the Gulf War, first Gulf War, and the backstory and how there was a guy in Idaho, the Chevy. What is his name? There was two brothers. They're part of a group called the Order that was connected to Richard Butler. Okay, that had been going around robbing armored cars. He walks into this barber shop or bar or whatever it was on the day of the bombing in Oklahoma City, the morning up before the bombing, and says, "Turn on the TV, something big's going to go down." What people didn't know is McVeigh spent time in North Idaho with those guys. Sure. Right. Right. Yeah. There's an attraction. There's an attraction, and it's. I mean, okay, a little bit of history. You've heard of Bo Grits, right? You know the story of Bo Grits. Bo Grits. So you know Rambo, movie Rambo. Okay, that colonel is based on a real guy named Bo Grits, allegedly. He was an officer in Vietnam. He moves to Idaho and sets up this like I can't remember if it was like Paradise Valley or something. I can't remember the name of this community, like in North Idaho, up near in Kootenai County area, where this is a place for patriots to come. And we're talking 1980s, 1990s, like in that time frame. So this is around the time of Richard Butler's attracted to this area, the Aryan nations show up. So he kind of like starts this whole move, this patriot movement of come to Idaho. This is, and later on they called it the Redoubt, but this is the haven for anyone who has anti-government sentiments. I mean, Ammon Bundy, or mistrust, right? Of like someone else, having say over your personal liberty and freedom. Okay, that's an affront to a lot of people. I get it. I have a liberty, a strain of libertarianism in me as well. In that sense, like right, I believe in personal liberty. I believe in individual freedom rights too. Um, Shocker, I'm not a leftist. I'm not a liberal. I know they keep calling me that, but it's not true. It's 100% false. Um, but keep lying, guys. Lie harder. The So Bo Grits, read about this guy. Really interesting character. He kind of kicks off a lot of this, and he fades away. But then you had what, Ruby Ridge, Richard Butler, all these guys. Go back and look up a guy named William Gale. This guy will terrify you. There's an excellent book. It's called The Terrorist Next Door, and it's written by Daniel Levitas, and I think it was written in 2000. And he tells the story of William Gale and the connections to Richard Butler going all the way back to World War II. Like it started with these guys post-war, World War II. They were based in California, actually, of all places, right? And they were deeply connected to, shocker, the John Birch Society. Yeah. Did you know they ran a candidate? They were opposing Dwight Eisenhower. And they were recruiting and running. So they were actually So they had deep ties to McCarthyism. Okay. That whole fringe. So this is history repeating itself. There was a far right back then. There's a far right now. And some of the guys that were in the far right now, those characters went on to be big players in John Birch Society, big players in, Aryan nations later on. They founded these groups. They pushed this theory. William Gale was I guess you can say, the founding father of the Posse Comitatus movement. Are you familiar with that term and what that is? So obviously the term goes back to Reconstructionism in the post Civil War, right? The federal government cannot engage in states, interfere in states. Like the army can't operate on U.S. soil, engaged in activities without that being suspended. So there was a law placed, and anyway, this book by Daniel Levitas goes into just so well researched into the history back post Civil War, how these bills were the legislation was pushed through Congress to prevent um, the federal government from overstepping and stepping in, and how a local militia or group or a sheriff's posse could be formed to push their own constitutional whatever. So this is actually where the start of, like, you've heard of the constitutional sheriff's movement. These ideas founded from this posse comitatus idea, and it's rooted, going back from the founding fathers. And there are elements of it that make sense. There are other elements of it, when you understand the history of it, that were there to protect the Southerners who were, actually pushing gun control on African Americans, on blacks, former slaves, etc. That it was actually there for the Southerners to protect what they wanted and what their goals and agendas were. Really interesting stuff. And so when you get back and understand that the actual history and why they do this is this mindset of, there is a libertarian streak to it, right? Personal liberty, like, this is mine, I can do whatever I want. But then they take it to another level of saying, well, the sheriff is the highest authority in the land locally, right? The constitutional sheriff. And that the federal government, I know the coroner is the only one who can arrest the sheriff. Right, right. It's kind of funny. And so that's why the coroner, yeah, yeah, which is funny that the coroner is a partisan position to elect. And wasn't it Brandon Durst's wife was running for coroner or something up there? It's just funny. Yeah, because they want that power, right? Like, oh, but I can arrest the sheriff. If he's not a constitutional sheriff, then I can arrest him and we can get our way around. No, it's an interesting mindset they have. Yeah, I've talked to people who said that he was pro-abortion when he was a Democrat senator. I think he's pro anyone who pays him. Well, he worked, yeah, I know, I know. So many stories about these guys. It's entertaining. All right, well, we should move on. It's been over. Sure. Mhm. Yeah, no one pays. I'm not loyal. I'm not owned loyal to anyone but myself. Sure. I appreciate it. Thank you. And let me just give one final disclosure, 'cause I'm dealing with highly litigious people. Um, you know, when you're dealing with certain elements of the far right, the lesson here is always try to be pristine with your data and what you're saying. Right? I attempted here to tell the truth of everything I know to be true, based on information and research. What I said, everything I said today, is my opinion. It's not a necessarily a statement of fact. I'm not intending to defame anyone. There's no malicious intent here. I'm just telling the truth and sharing my opinion. So I just wanted to put that out there. I really appreciate you having me on, Scott. It was a great conversation. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Thanks.